What's up guys, David797 here. In this video I just want to quickly talk about Apple's new MacBook Pro, the 2016 MacBook Pro that incorporates the new touch bar that they've added, the OLED long touch bar with the fingerprint scanner on the right hand side. Now this MacBook seems to have come under fire quite quickly for being quite different, and that Apple has actually removed the functions and that they've completely annihilated most of the ports. Now I'm just going to add my thoughts and opinions on what I think of what they've done. Firstly, my opinion isn't as bad as what so many people are. I can completely understand some people's negative or hate for the new MacBook Pro. I think it's actually a really clever integration of touch and a standard L-shaped MacBook. So I actually really like that. Something that I've always agreed with many years ago in 2010, Steve Jobs said this about a MacBook.
We thought about this years ago. We've done tons of user testing on this, and it turns out it doesn't work. Touch surfaces don't want to be vertical. It gives great demo, but after a short period of time, you start to fatigue, and after an extended period of time, your arm wants to fall off. It doesn't work. It's ergonomically terrible. Touch surfaces want to be horizontal, hence pads. For a notebook, that's why we've perfected our multi-touch trackpads over the years, because that's the best way we've found to get multi-touch into a notebook. We've also, in essence, put a trackpad, a multi-touch trackpad, on the mouse with our Magic Mouse, and we've recently come out with a pure play trackpad as well for our desktop users.
So Steve said that 6 years ago. Now something I remember when he said that, I was watching that event, and it actually, I really agreed with it at the time, because I was working in a retail store and I used to operate we used to have the registers as a touch panel that sat in front of you, and you'd be operating that all day, and it was extremely unergonomic. It was the most stupid place to place a touch screen in the world. I always just wished I could rip the thing off and put it on the counter so it was flat. So that's something that back then it completely made sense. Now obviously we've seen changes with that now, with a lot of Windows laptops are touch based, big all-in-one displays, touch based, and some people do use them. Now I still think that's a bit of a silly place to have a touch screen. I know some people, now we're so used to tablets and iPads and all those other devices that we intrinsically reach to touch the screen as opposed to what we used to in the past. Now I'm guilty of it too. I mean, I have a iPad Pro with the keyboard. I use this multiple times at the table or at my desk or something. And then I switch over to not so much my desktop, but I switch over to my MacBook. And intrinsically, I sometimes reach for the screen because I'm just so used to reaching forward for the screen. But that doesn't mean I don't think that's still a good idea. In saying that, don't think I'm completely agreeing with Apple's idea to not integrate touch into the MacBook. But I think it's a really clever way to integrate usefulness into a laptop and without doing touch screen and having the user have to reach up to the actual display. So I think that's really clever. It looks really useful for video editing and scrubbing through. Really cool for getting to your bookmarks, opening new tabs and all that sort of thing while you're on the keyboard without having to move your hand down. You just sort of reach forward and tap that part of the touchpad. Now in saying that, other parts of the MacBook is obviously the keyboard's been redesigned. I haven't really typed on one, so I can't really comment. I've typed on the MacBook 12-inch and it did definitely feel a little bit weird, a little bit foreign to not have as much travel in the keys, though I haven't used one regularly to know whether I would get used to it. And the only other thing was the elimination of ports. Now personally this would not affect me. I've got my 2011 early MacBook Pro that I've had for 5 years now, and it's still going really great. But I have upgraded this to a 256 SSD and 16 gigabytes of RAM, so it is still going strong due to upgrades. Now it's got all these ports along this side, and to be honest, the only one I use really is the power one. I occasionally use a USB when I back things up, and I use the SD card the most. So the only thing I really don't like that Apple's done is remove the SD card slot, because that's probably the biggest thing I use. As soon as I finish doing this video, I'm going to throw the SD card into my iMac to get the video footage off. Or if I was using a laptop, I'm going to throw the SD card into this. I have a dash cam in my car, and sometimes if I want to get footage or need to do anything, reformat the SD card, it goes straight into my MacBook usually, just because it's easily accessible. So I think they sort of jumped the gun there. We're getting rid of the SD card slot, but everything else in terms of me wouldn't affect me. You know, most people use Wi-Fi now, so the Ethernet ports sort of become irrelevant. They did keep the headphone jack, which I think is good, because obviously music professionals are going to still use that. USB, they've gone to USB-C. Now, a lot of people are like, oh, I need a dongle for this. But if I grab what I use to back up my computer, I use an external hard drive that has a USB port. Now, I don't need to get a dongle to use this. I can just... the cable just needs to be replaced. So that's something that I found a bit weird, that people are like, oh, you need a dongle for this and a dongle for that. It's like, well, if the only thing I would need with a new MacBook would be an SD card dongle. That's about it. I can understand some people who, you know, regularly plug in displays, regularly plug in a bunch of other things that I can completely understand that. And I do really miss MagSafe. MagSafe is awesome. So now Apple's prices have gone through the roof. The prices start for the entry-level MacBook at $2,199, and that's Australian dollars, and then step up to $2,699 and $2,999. So that's, you know, to get a MacBook Pro now, you've got to spend at least $2,000. When I bought mine, it was an entry-level MacBook Pro. It wasn't the white MacBook that was out at the time. I really contemplated the two. What sold me on the MacBook Pro was the SD card slot, because doing a lot of video, it was just to, you know, mainly the ease of getting my video files to the computer. The MacBook Pro, it was that little bit premium, but it still only cost me $1,500. It didn't cost me $2,000. You know, $1,500 now wouldn't even get, it would get me last year's model, or it's going to get me a MacBook Air. And to do video editing, I'm not going to do very well. Like back then, video editing on this thing was possible. Like now it's not, with HD and everything. It's just not it goes okay, but it's certainly not that capable. Buying a $1,500 laptop equivalent would not actually get me equivalent of what that was at the time. It would probably get me something equivalent of what it is now. I could probably get a MacBook Air. That's really about it. Or last year's model MacBook Pro. I don't do much editing on laptops. I use my iMac. And I just wanted to comment on, like, a lot of people saying, Apple, hurry up and put touchscreen on your MacBooks. Now, I don't agree with this. I don't think MacBooks will ever have touchscreen, or I would hope not. I think the MacBook line really needs to remain OS X, you know, professional style, where you're using a mouse and keyboard most of the time, or you're using the trackpad with gestures or the touch bar. So touch bar, like I said, I think it's a really cool integration. Now, in saying that, I don't think they should never do some form of an integrated line. Now, I think they could do that through them iPad Pros. I don't think a touchscreen MacBook, but I reckon an OS X iPad would be the way to go. Now, I wouldn't say it should just have OS X, or Mac OS as it's called now, sorry. Wouldn't it be great if, you know, we had iOS on the top level, and then you had an app that was like Mac OS. You tap that app and boom, it opens up and you're straight in, similar to how Windows 8 sort of implemented, boom, sort of like the desktop button, and it flicks you straight into the desktop style OS that you can then use with your keyboard, as we're already using keyboards with iPads, and you can Bluetooth a mouse to it. Basically, they run almost two completely different, like in two different universes. You're in iOS, you're running iOS apps, you can only see your iOS apps. To then get into your Mac OS, you tap a button or an app, and boom, it flicks you in, it folds away, and suddenly you're on the Mac OS desktop, and you then need to use a mouse and a keyboard, and you're using it as essentially a laptop. But then, you know, that it could just be as simple as an icon on the desktop, you double click on that, and boom, it flicks you straight back into iOS. You're back to touch screen, your stylus and your pencil, and you can draw. I think that will be a better experience for a touchscreen OS Mac version, or a Mac OS touchscreen, rather than throwing a touchscreen on a laptop. I definitely think a laptop, you know, having a touchscreen in front of you vertically is not the way to go. But anyway, that's my thoughts, guys. You know, the MacBook Pro, I think it's a decent upgrade. It's freaking expensive, and I'm not planning to buy one because my MacBook's still going fine. I've got my iPad too, so it's completely, I'm just throwing my opinions out there. I'm not as negative as some other people, because to me, if I was buying one, it would not be a deal breaker. I would consider it. To be honest, I probably wouldn't go for the touch bar just because of the price. I would be looking at either, or I would actually consider even going for a lower end model, like the one without the touch bar, or even last year's model if I was deciding to upgrade. But to be honest, because I've got the iPad Air now, the MacBook is really, I'm just holding on to it because I have it. I don't want to sell it, and I just have it. So I use it occasionally if I don't want to sit in here on the iMac. Other than that, I pretty much use the iPad Pro. Anyway, that's it for this video, guys. Please let me know your thoughts about the MacBook Pro in the comment section below. If you like this video, please hit that thumbs up button and subscribe for some more videos. Thanks again. See you.